Second meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security. Can I first remind everyone to silence your mobile phones? Let me also remind anyone who plans to speak from a prepared text to please provide that text to the Secretariat, if at all possible, so that our interpreters will have an easier time. Colleagues, the agenda of this meeting has been circulated. We will consider amendments to the draft resolution, and time permitting, we'll start on the consideration of our first supplementary item. Can I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections to the agenda? Do you wish to speak on the draft agenda? No. Okay, I thought there was an objection. I do not see an objection. Seeing not, the agenda is adopted. Thank you. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 27 amendments and one compromise amendment have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available. I've also been given a notice of a number of an oral amendment and an oral sub-amendment. In discussing amendments, I will call the proposer of the amendment or amendments first, and then I will call any opponent of the amendment for 1 minute each. I'll then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, Mr. Kasunas, for his opinion on the amendment. Following that, I shall put the amendment to a vote. At the end of each paragraph, I shall put the paragraph to a vote. I ask speakers to please observe the time limit of 1 minute. We will begin with paragraph 1. Is there anyone against paragraph 1? Please raise your voting cards. Those in favor of paragraph 1, please raise your voting cards. Do we need a full count? Thank you. You may lower your cards. Any abstentions to paragraph 1, please raise your voting cards. Paragraph 1 is agreed to. We now move to Amendment 1. I call Mr. Cardin of the United States to propose Amendment 1. Mr. Cardin, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following the Russian initial invasion of Ukraine in 2014, I introduced the supplementary item in the 2014 annual session in Baku, decrying Moscow's actions as clear, gross, and uncorrected violations of the Helsinki principles. Since then, this assembly has repeatedly used the same language to describe Russia's aggression. This is important because the words clear, gross, and uncorrected are important because they echo the Prague document, which constitutes the basis for adopting decisions based on consensus -1 within the context of the OSCE. In using this language, this assembly demonstrates the popular will of the participating states to see Russia barred from blocking consensus on Ukraine, the country it has unilaterally and illegally invaded. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we speak with a plain, strong voice about Russia's flagrant violations of the Helsinki principles. It can no longer pretend to be a viable stakeholder in Europe's peace while it's its greatest threat.
Thank you, Mr. Cardin. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 1? Seeing none, I will ask Mr. Kasunas for your opinion on Amendment 1.
I'm okay with the amendment. Support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 1 to a vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 1 please raise your voting card? Thank you. All those against Amendment 1, please raise your voting card. Any abstentions? Amendment 1 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 2 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 2, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraph 2 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 2 is agreed to. We will now vote on paragraphs 3 and 4 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? So we will take paragraphs 3 and 4 together. Anyone against paragraph 3 and 4, please raise your voting cards. Okay, those in favor of paragraphs 3 and 4, please raise your voting cards. Clear majority. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 3 and 4 are agreed to. I call Mr. Abe from Switzerland to propose Amendment 2. You are recognized for 1 minute.
Ja, Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Damen und Herren, ganz klar, wir verurteilen diesen Angriffskrieg aufs Schärfste. Nichtsdestotrotz kann der uns heute vorliegende Paragraph 5 längerfristig zu negativen Folgen führen. Mit dem ausdrücklichen Wunsch, die internationale Isolation Russlands zu verstärken, pflichten wir nicht nur unsere parlamentarische Versammlung, wir riskieren auch, die OSZE als Ganzes zu schwächen, indem wir einen Kaskadeneffekt auslösen, den wir nicht mehr eindämmen können. Die OSZE ist heute die einzige multilaterale Plattform, die alle an den Konflikten beteiligten Parteien an einen Tisch bringen kann. Die historische Mission der OSZE sowie unsere eigene Mission beruhen auf diesem unerschütterlichen Willen zum Dialog, so schwierig und unerträglich dieser derzeit auch sein mag. Daher muss die Möglichkeit des Dialogs zu jeder Zeit und unter allen Umständen erhalten bleiben, in unserer Versammlung sowie in allen weiteren OSZE-Gremien.
Thank the gentleman. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 2? The gentleman from Latvia, Mr. Richard Coles, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, I would like to remind you that on the plenary session, we actually adopted a resolution in which we agreed that we further have to suspend or isolate Russia. So therefore, if we agree on this paragraph to be excluded, we somewhat sending a wrong message. So therefore, I invite colleagues to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of the amendment.
I think it's not time for business as usual. That's why I'm also opposing the amendment.
Thank you. I will now put Amendment 2 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 2 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Would those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Please raise your voting card. The amendment is defeated. We will now vote on paragraph 5. Anyone against paragraph 5, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those in favor of paragraph 5, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 5 is agreed to. We'll now move to Amendment 3. I'll call on Ms. Carolyn Beatties from Cyprus to propose Amendment 3 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 5. Ms. Carolyn Beatties, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment aims to highlight the role of national parliaments in adopting sanctions against aggressor states. It must be underlined that the aim of terminating violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states by revisionist states, or at least efforts to stem the financing of such wars, are steps in the direction of upholding core international law and principles, including the Helsinki Final Act. Today, in the OSCE area, a number of states have not, I repeat, have not applied sanctions against Russia. Furthermore, invoking their neutrality, they are actively helping the evasion of sanctions, acquiring significant benefits from Russia and Russian oligarchs. This is significantly reducing the deterrence power of sanctions and undermines, in the long run, adherence to international legality. In this regard, I want to underline that there are more aggressor states that must be deterred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 3? See not. Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of the amendment.
I'm supporting. amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 3 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 3 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? I see one. Any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 6. Anyone against paragraph 6, please raise your voting card. Would all those in favor of paragraph 6, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 6 is agreed to. We'll now move to Amendment 4. I call on Ms. Lukoczka from Poland to propose Amendment 4 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 6. Ms. Lukoczka, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Yes, thank you very much. This amendment is about adding a new paragraph after paragraph 6. It's about destruction of the Nowa Kachowka. Nowa Kachowka dam by the Russian occupation forces has profound consequences. Not only did it force thousands of people to leave their homes, posing a direct threat for their lives, but also it caused substantial material damage. At least 10 people died at the territories controlled by the Ukraine. Both private and public property was damaged or destroyed, so as the infrastructure assets, including Kachowka hydropower plant. The barbaric Russian act threatened the operations of the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. Costs for ecological balance of the southern Ukraine are difficult to assess, but the destruction will surely affect the region. 72% of water reserves in the Kachowka were lost. The water supply of many large Ukrainian cities is now in danger. There is no doubt that causing a disaster on such a scale is a criminal act. It illustrates the Russian vision of the complete destruction of Ukraine and its statehood. As such, Russian attack must be condemned and those responsible held accountable and punished.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 4? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of Amendment 4?
It's a good example when you table the report and, Russian is doing something brutal once again and you cannot, include it originally. So thank you for the amendment. I support it, absolutely.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 4 to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 4 please raise your voting card? Thank you. All those against Amendment 4, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 4 is adopted. We'll now move to Amendment 5. I'll call Mr. Cardin of the United States to propose Amendment 5. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Congressman Cohen, I offer this amendment that makes it clear that Russia's actions fit multiple definitions of genocide under the 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. We all know all the activities that Russia has done in Ukraine, and it does fit, unfortunately, the definition of genocide. Russian forces have repeatedly and deliberately targeted civilians, established systems of torture centers and concentration camps, attacked basic infrastructure, medical facilities, and even maternity hospitals and schools, employed sexual violence as a weapon of terror against women, children, and men, and carried out a program of mass deportation, which has included the kidnapping of children for forcible adoption and Russification. All that fits the definitions of genocide. We need to speak with a clear voice.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 5? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support the amendment.
Thank you. We'll now put Amendment 5 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 5, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Anyone opposed to Amendment 5, please raise your voting card. 1. 2. Thank you. Any abstentions? 5. 6. Thank you. Amendment 5 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 7 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 7, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 7, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 7 is agreed to. Now move to Amendment 6. I call Mr. Costel de Nova from Romania to propose Amendment 6 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 7. Mr. de Nova, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to the provisions of this resolution, I strongly believe that it is important to include the findings of the OSCE Moscow Mechanism missions, which established that Russian armed forces have been largely responsible for serious violations of international humanitarian law, as well as the report concerning the forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. So I think it's needed to introduce this new paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 6? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 6 to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 6 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 6, please raise your voting cards. And any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 6 is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 8 through 12 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs, 8 through 12? So we'll take together paragraphs 8 through 12. Anyone against these paragraphs, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraphs 8 through 12, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 8 through 12 are agreed to. Now move to Amendment 7. I now call Mr. Costel de Nava from Romania to propose Amendment 7 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 12. Mr. de Nava, you're recognized for 1 minute.
It's not my amendment. I think it's made by somebody else.
I apologize. Mr. Potorayev. Mr. Potorayev from Ukraine, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Colleagues, it's a very simple amendment. It's about Crimea. We have to remember that while people in eastern and southern Ukraine are suffering from Russian invasion, there are Crimean Tatars, there are Crimean Ukrainians, there are people in Crimea who are suffering for more than 8 years already under severe Russian occupation, under hard Russian oppression and repressions, who are tortured, who are imprisoned for huge terms in Russian Siberian prisons and camps. So let's not forget about sufferings of Crimean population under Russian occupation.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 7? Mr. Kashunas.
Yes,
your
I am
opinion.
supporting the amendment.
Great. We shall now put Amendment 7 to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 7 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Those against? And any abstentions? Amendment 7 is adopted.
I didn't listen and I raised my hand. So scrap the, because I wasn't following what you've said,
How do you wish to be recorded?
like the rest of the...
For the amendment?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, the
Yeah.
amendment was adopted.
Sorry.
And, let the record
Sorry,
reflect
sorry, I was...
that the lady from Cyprus agrees with the amendment. Thank you. Paragraph 13, we will now vote on paragraph 13. Anyone against paragraph 13? Thank you. Those in favor, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 13 is agreed to. Now, we'll move to Amendment 8. Amendment 8 and 17 have now been superseded by a compromise amendment, which has been made available. I call Mr. Defossé to propose the compromise amendment, which would insert a new paragraph after paragraph 13. You are recognized for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mais je pense qu'il y a une petite erreur. L'idée était d'introduire cet amendement après le paragraphe 29 et pas le paragraphe 13. Je ne sais pas si vous voulez voter dessus maintenant ou est-ce qu'on reporte au 29. Oui, Monsieur le Président, donc je disais qu'il y a une erreur dans l'amendement déposé, c'est après le paragraphe 29 et pas le paragraphe 13.
The body will suspend. Okay. All right, that is agreeable. Will you restate that, where the amendment is to be placed? Okay.
After the 29.
Okay, so we'll come back to that amendment when we get to that paragraph. Thank you. We'll now move to Amendment 9. I call on Ms. Potuchka, I apologize, from the Czech Republic to propose Amendment 9.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Mrs. Patuchkova. And the Conventional Armed Forces in Europe Treaty, a cornerstone of Europe's security, was signed by the representatives of two blocs, NATO and Warsaw Pact, in 1990 as an important act to end the Cold War, while committing themselves to reducing military equipment. In 2007, Russia suspended its participation in the treaty, and in 2015, formally announced it was completely halting the participation in it. However, the very last step was taken in May this year when Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree on the withdrawal from the CFE treaty. This Russia's decision is just the latest one in a series of actions that systematically undermines Euro-Atlantic security and demonstrates Moscow's continued disregard for arms control. In other words, we must stay alert, because this withdrawal from such an important treaty is just another signal in a row of signals that shows us really clearly that Russia is not an agreement-keeping partner, that Russia is not a country to be trusted, and it just prepares the ground for further violations of international law.
Thank you, Ms. Potuchkova. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 9? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support the amendment, makes it stronger of a document. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 9 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 9, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 9, please raise your voting cards. Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 9 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 14 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 14, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 14 as amended, please raise your card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 14 as amended is agreed to. We will now take paragraphs 15 through 18 together. Does anyone want to separate any of these paragraphs? So we'll take paragraphs 15 to 18 together. Those against these paragraphs, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraphs 15 through 18, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 15 through 18 are agreed to. We'll now move to Amendment 10. Mr. Vesey's amendment will be, okay. The gentlelady from the United States is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Russian Federation's genocidal war against Ukraine didn't occur in a vacuum or without warning. We ought to recognize that our existing European security architecture failed to stop this war. In particular, the key components of our security architecture did not manage to deter or punish the Russian Federation's consistent, repeated, and oftentimes flagrant violations of its obligation under the Helsinki Final Act and the UN Charter. Instead, our institutions continue to treat Moscow's acts of aggressions as lessons to be learned rather than as a call to action to counter this this very long-standing efforts to destroy sovereignty of its neighbor. In this sense, our basic assumptions about Russia were incorrect. And we have to fix this. After this illegal war is over, we must reforge a security architecture that is more clear-eyed about managing future aggression and provide future deterrents. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Sparks. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 10? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
A very good amendment. I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I should now put Amendment 10 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 10, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those opposed, please raise your voting card. And any abstentions? Amendment 10 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 19. Anyone against paragraph 19, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraph 19, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 19 is agreed to. I'll now call on Mr. Wilson from the United States to propose Amendment 11. Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians. As we have before us today an amendment, and it's important that we start the section of the resolution keeping in mind the subtitle that the rapporteur has chosen of bringing our attention to the original cause and the long-term solution to the suffering of the people of Ukraine, and it must bear repeating. The cause, of course, sadly, is war criminal Putin's war and occupation of Ukrainian territory. Putin himself can end this genocidal war in a moment, yet he refuses to do so. And while we work to help Ukrainians with aid and military support, we must bear in mind our concrete goal, and that is expelling Russia completely from Ukrainian territory for territorial integrity. War criminal Putin is sacrificing young Russians to death for Putin's personal benefit of oil, money, and power. When the day comes, recovery will not be instant. Even so, we must be confident that restoration and real peace will only come from Ukrainian victory. I ask that you vote in support of this important reminder of these essential facts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 11? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
A very good amendment because, yes, somehow we missed that, but, you know, we should call it Russian formal occupation instead of conflict. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I should now put Amendment 11 to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 11 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 11, please raise your voting cards. Any abstentions? Amendment 11 is adopted. We come now to Oral Amendment 1, which would also amend paragraph 20. I call Ms. Bochovishvili from Georgia to read out the text of the oral amendment.
Thank you very much. First of all, I thank all of you for supporting to replace the word here and put occupation in this paragraph, which more precisely reflects the situation in Georgia. But here I would like to add something missing from this paragraph, which is very important, and it is about all hundreds of thousands of people who are displaced from their homes, and they can't go back.
If the delegate would suspend, I'll give you a second to speak on the amendment.
Okay.
I just want to get the text clear, and then I'll recognize you to debate the amendment.
I propose to add words after ceasefire agreement, safe and dignified return of IDPs and refugees to their homes, and constructive engagement in Geneva international discussions. And at the end of this paragraph, to end words and International Criminal Court.
Thank you. And so an oral amendment has been proposed that in paragraph 20, after the words ceasefire agreement, add safe and dignified return of IDFs and refugees to their homes and constructive engagement in Geneva international disclosures. And after the words January 2021, add and International Criminal Court. In accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I will ask whether there's any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there's any objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it fails. Is there any objection to this oral amendment? Since there's no objection, we will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way of other amendments. That is, we'll hear from our proposer of the oral amendment, one speaker against, and the opinion of the rapporteur. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. I now call Ms. Bochovishvili of Georgia for 1 minute to debate the amendment.
Thank you very much. So as I was mentioning, it is very important that we talk about those people who are replaced from their homes for decades now. And I would like to thank all the delegations presented in this room who are supporting resolution in the UN on this very topic, and it would be very good if our Parliamentary Assembly also includes this topic in our resolution and reflects the need to ensure safe and dignified return of hundreds of thousands of Georgians which were victims of ethnic cleansing during different wars and Russian aggression happening in Georgia since 90s and 2008 war as well. And the second edition that I am proposing, we are talking about very important decision of European Court of Human Rights, and thank you for reflecting these decisions in this resolution. But I would also like to propose to include decisions and rulings of International Criminal Court to bring or perpetrators of crimes that were committed in 2008 and responsible. So that's why I'm proposing to add this International Criminal Court, which is very important international institution, and it is important to listen to them and implement their rulings. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this oral amendment? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support the amendment.
I shall now put the oral amendment to the vote. All those in favor of the oral amendment, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those against the oral amendment, please raise your voting card. Any abstentions? The oral amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 20 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 20 as amended, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 20 as amended, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 20 as amended is agreed to. I now call Mr. Handanyan from Armenia to propose Amendment 12.
Mr. Chair, one of the most important bases for the peace process and negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan is the mutual recognition of each other's territorial integrity. Recently, Armenia has been very vocal in recognizing Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, and we expect similar position of Azerbaijan in this regard. In this context, it is very important also and necessary to guarantee the rights and security of Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh in close cooperation with the international community, a position that has been strongly supported by the European Union and the United States, parties actively engaged, bringing peace to our region. And these amendments are actually echoing those positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 12? The gentleman from Azerbaijan is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, dear Chair, dear colleagues. Well, we welcome the Armenia's commitment to recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, but there are some things. The unilateral amendment proposed by Armenian delegation prejudge the outcomes of the bilateral negotiations on the peace treaty and do not serve the purpose of building confidence and trust, but raise tensions and divert the attention of the Assembly from the key objective, which is turning the page of confrontation and normalization of relations between two countries, as reflected in the original draft resolution. On the one hand, Armenian delegation in this amendment claims it favors developing a positive agenda. But on the other hand, yesterday, we have heard from this very delegation yet again references to self-determination, which is the code word for Armenia for over 3 decades for illegal occupation, secession, ethnic cleansing, and illegal annexation that we all reject as a policy in international relations. This is the hidden agenda of the Armenian delegation to use the Assembly in its political manipulations. Colleagues, therefore, we call the Assembly to keep the original text and vote against the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of the amendment?
I would propose to stick to the original version of the resolution.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 12 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 12 please raise your voting card and hold it high so that we can count? Please keep your voting cards up. Thank you. Those opposed to the amendment, please raise your voting card. Please hold the cards up while we count. Okay. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 21 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 21, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 21, please raise your voting card. In favor of the paragraph. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 21 as amended is agreed to. I now call Mr. Handanyan from Armenia to propose Amendment 13. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, first of all, the purpose of this amendment is to acknowledge the important role that the European Union plays in bringing peace in our region. But also, while the peace negotiations are ongoing between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it is very important to ensure the border security on the ground and address the existing issues. After last year's aggressions of Azerbaijan against the sovereign territory of Armenia, Azerbaijan has not withdrawn its troops from the territory of Armenia, and we think that it's important that this assembly address this issue. This was one of the reasons also that the European Union deployed its civilian mission to monitor the situation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 13? The gentleman from Azerbaijan is recognized for 1 minute.
Colleagues, foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan just concluded next round of negotiations on peace treaty in Washington this week, facilitated by U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. Both sides and Secretary Blinken reported on progress in drafting the peace treaty. At this critical juncture, the OSCE participating states and we, parliamentarians, should approach the situation with utmost care and not to jeopardize the sensitive and fragile peace process. The unilateral amendment proposed by Armenian delegation prejudged again the outcomes of the bilateral negotiations on the peace treaty and contain unfounded allegations against Azerbaijan that do not serve the purpose of confidence and trust, but raise tensions and divert the attention of the Assembly from the key objective, which is turning the page of confrontation and normalization of relations. The draft paragraph already sufficiently covers the subject matter and welcomes diplomatic efforts aiming at facilitating dialogue and building confidence and trust between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Therefore, we call the Assembly to keep the original text and vote against the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of the amendment?
To keep the original text.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 13 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 13, please raise your voting cards and please hold them while we get a good count. Thank you. Those against Amendment 13, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Got 9, 10 abstentions. Does it pass? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 22 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 22 as amended, please raise your voting card. 1. Thank you. All those in favor of paragraph 22 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 22 as amended is agreed to. How do you pronounce Hajiani? I now call Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus to propose Amendment 14. Mr. Hajiani, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, it's been almost 2 years since Taliban entered Afghanistan's capital city of Kabul and took control of the country. Over the past 24 months, human rights violations against women and girls have mounted steadily. Despite initial promises that women would be allowed to exercise their rights within Sharia law, including the right to work and to study, the Taliban has systematically excluded women and girls from public and political life. In addition to all this, we must not forget, and we should stress again and again, all kinds of abuse that women and girls have suffered today. Considering all these aspects, I propose including in paragraph 23 a specific reference of all forms of sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated by terrorist groups. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 14? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support for the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 14 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 14 please raise your voting card? Thank you. Those against, please raise your voting card. And any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 14 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 23 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 23, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraph 23 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 23 as amended is agreed to. I now call Mr. Habib from France to propose Amendment 15 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 23. Mr. Habib, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Oui, merci. C'est Madame Boyer de la France qui va défendre l'amendement pour notre collègue Meyer Habib, mais cet amendement est signé par toute la délégation française. Il vise à ajouter un nouveau paragraphe afin d'exprimer... donc c'est une insertion au paragraphe 23 pour se déclarer profondément préoccupé par le fait que l'augmentation des stocks d'uranium enrichi à des taux allant de 20 à 85% en République islamique d'Iran, en violation totale des accords de Vienne, telle qu'elle a été observée par l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique. Cela constitue une étape supplémentaire dans la mise au point d'une arme nucléaire en Iran et serait, eu égard à la nature du régime iranien et des dispositions du traité sur la non-prolifération des armes nucléaires, une menace imminente, grave et irréversible pour l'équilibre, la stabilité et la sécurité du Moyen-Orient et bien évidemment bien au-delà. Et j'en profite pour dire qu'il n'est pas possible aujourd'hui de soutenir les exactions du régime iranien vis-à-vis de son propre peuple et que voter cet amendement y participe. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Ms. Boyer. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 15? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support for amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 15 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 15, please raise your voting card. Thank you. All those against, please raise your voting card. Got 1. Abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 15 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraphs 24 to 27 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? So we will take paragraphs 24 to 27 together. Anyone against paragraph 24 through 27, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 24 to 27, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 24 to 27 are agreed to. I call Mr. Abe from Switzerland to propose Amendment 16. You're recognized for 1 minute, sir.
Ja, geschätzte Damen und Herren, es ist für uns alle offensichtlich, dass die Ukraine derzeit einen dringenden Bedarf an Hilfe aus allen unseren Ländern hat. Es ist auch klar, dass wir eher diese Hilfe zukommen lassen werden. Diese Hilfe kann sich sowohl auf finanzielle, humanitäre als auch auf militärische Unterstützung beziehen. Mein Land leistet bereits der Ukraine eine substanzielle finanzielle und humanitäre Hilfe und wird dies auch künftig tun. Als Depositarstaat der Genfer Konventionen und aufgrund seiner Neutralität ist es uns jedoch nicht möglich, den ukrainischen Streitkräften direkte militärische Unterstützung zukommen zu lassen. Um den Grundsatz der Neutralität, der in den Verfassungen einiger unserer Länder verankert ist, zu respektieren, schlage ich diesen Änderungsantrag vor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 16? Mr. Kashunis, your opinion.
You know, my idea is to keep the original version because, you know, humanitarian aid comes together with military support. And if we want to have credible, real peace in Ukraine, we need to support Ukraine to defend itself. It's a main precondition.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 16 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 16 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 16, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Failed. The amendment is defeated. We will now vote on paragraph 28. Anyone against paragraph 28, please raise your voting card. Those in favor of paragraph 28, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? 5, 6. Paragraph 28 is agreed to.
It's compromised now.
So this. Thank you. We will now vote on paragraph 29. Is there anyone against paragraph 29? Those in favor of paragraph 29, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 29 is agreed to. We'll now get to our compromise amendment. Amendments 8 and 17 have now been superseded by a compromise amendment which has been made available. I call on Mr. Defosse to propose the compromise amendment, which would insert a new paragraph after paragraph 13.
29.
After paragraph 29. Mr. Defosse, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je voudrais d'abord remercier Kyriakos d'avoir accepté de fusionner nos deux amendements. Comme vous le savez, le 6 juin, la Fédération de Russie a décidé de faire sauter le barrage de Nova Kakhovka, créant ainsi une catastrophe humaine avec des milliers de civils évacués, des villages détruits et des infrastructures détruites. Notre collègue de Pologne en a d'ailleurs parlé. Ce crime met aussi une nouvelle fois en danger la centrale nucléaire de Zaporijjia, avec les risques que cela comporte pour la sécurité des habitants de l'Ukraine, mais également de toute l'Europe en cas d'implosion. Et puis, la destruction du barrage constitue également une catastrophe sur le plan écologique. La pollution des terres arables et des zones marécageuses va affecter de nombreuses espèces et l'abaissement du niveau du Dniepr et de ses affluents va perturber les habitats naturels ainsi que les systèmes d'irrigation. Le groupe de travail sur les conséquences écologiques de la guerre en Ukraine estime que 80 000 hectares de réserves naturelles ont ainsi été détruits. Vous le savez, la notion d'écocide est débattue depuis 1947 et n'a toujours pas trouvé de traduction dans le droit international. Or, les événements qui ont lieu en Ukraine démontrent, s'il le fallait encore, qu'il est urgent pour la communauté internationale que ce soit le cas. C'est donc le sens de notre amendement.
Thank you. Does Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus wish to add anything? Mr. Hajiani, you're recognized for 1 minute if you'd like to speak on the compromise amendment.
No, thank you. It's okay. Thank you very much. And I will thanks also my colleagues from Belgium. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the compromise amendment? The gentleman from Poland is recognized for 1 minute.
I'm not even speaking against the amendment, against some sort of redundancy. Rather, we've already addressed the issue with a previous amendment, so there's just a question if it's needed in that after that paragraph. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Kashunas, your opinion of the compromise amendment?
We can repeat it 2 times, no problem. I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put the compromise amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor of the compromise amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Those opposed, please raise your voting card. Are there any abstentions? The compromise amendment is adopted. So Amendment 17 has been superseded by the earlier compromise amendment. We will now move to a vote on paragraphs 30 to 32 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? So we'll take the paragraphs 30 through 32 together. Anyone against these paragraphs, please raise your voting card. Anyone in favor of paragraphs 30 to 32, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 30 to 32 are agreed to. We now come to amendments 18 to 20, which all relate to paragraph 33. The nature of these amendments means that they are mutually exclusive, so only one of these amendments may be adopted, subject to the outcome of the votes. As per Rule 22, paragraph 5, we will consider Amendment 18. If adopted, I will not be able to call on Amendments 19 or 20. I now call on Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 18. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. This is a compromise amendment in many ways. We want to insert after the words participating states to use redouble international efforts to achieve the global elimination of nuclear weapons within a time-bound framework, including by negotiating a comprehensive nuclear weapons convention or framework of agreements as recommended in the final document of the 8th Review Conference of the Parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. We will remove by signing and ratifying, and we will remove, sign and ratify, and then put in the 2017 Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and remove the last paragraph, end a period at nuclear weapons. I think we know we want to talk about the reality here, Chair. The problem is many people oppose signing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And yet we have all signed on to wanting a nuclear-free world. So the bottom line is if we don't sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, we need to have a fallback. We need to negotiate something else that's going to replace it. And that's all that I'm suggesting in this amendment. It's to give us a solution and not just a black or white
Thank you.
solution. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 18? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
I'm okay with the amendment. Support it.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 18 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 18 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. All those against the amendment, please raise your voting cards. Any abstentions? Okay, so Amendment 18 is adopted, and consequently, Amendments 19 and 20 fall. We will now vote on paragraph 33 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 33, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 33, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 33 is agreed to. We will now vote on paragraphs 34 and 35 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on these paragraphs? So we will take paragraphs 34 and 35 together. Anyone against these paragraphs, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraphs 34 and 35, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraphs 34 and 35 are agreed to. I'll now call on Mr. Wicker from the United States to propose Amendment 21 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 35. Mr. Wicker, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment deals with the malign activity of the People's Republic of China in OSCE member states. In particular, there are a number of fortunate Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, and others who have been able to escape the People's Republic of China and come to member states in the OSCE. In response to this, the People's Republic of China is establishing repressive activities such as so-called police stations or so-called service stations, which function to intimidate and cause the forced repatriation of these dissidents. This amendment calls attention to this and asks us to do everything in our power to restrict the involuntary return of these citizens of the world. I urge adoption.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 21? Mr. Kashunas, your opinion.
Support of amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 21 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 21, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 21, please raise your voting cards. Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 21 is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 36 and 37 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on these paragraphs? Okay, I'm sorry. We're gonna take paragraphs 36 through 39 together. Does anyone wish a separate vote? Dr. Fry is recognized to register an objection.
It's not necessarily an objection, Chair. I would like to just propose an oral amendment to paragraph 38.
Okay,
It
the gentlelady will
refers-
suspend.
Sorry.
So because we'll have an oral amendment to paragraph 38, we will take paragraphs 36 and 37 together. Is there any objection to considering these two together? See not, we will put it to a vote. Anyone against paragraphs 36 and 37, please raise your voting card if you're against these paragraphs. All those in favor of paragraphs 36 and 37, please raise your cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? So paragraphs 36 and 37 are agreed to. So an oral amendment has been proposed in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure. First, I'll ask whether there's any objection to the oral amendment being considered. Do we have the oral amendment? Would the delegate from Canada please state the amendment?
Is to change the word women's network to gender.
Thank you. So the proposed oral amendment is to change women's to gender. Is there any objection to this oral amendment? If there is an objection, it cannot be considered. Seeing as there's no objection, we'll proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as any other amendment. That is, we will hear from the proposer of the oral amendment, one speaker against the oral amendment, and the opinion of the rapporteur. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. If there's any objection to the oral amendment, seeing as there's no objection, I call on the proposer of the amendment, Dr. Hetty Fry, to speak for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I need a minute, although I'd like a minute. But I wanted to suggest that the correct term is gender, because gender is inclusive. It includes men, not just women. And we do have men who are members of that informal gender network. So it's just getting the right word in there that's inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral amendment? So what is the opinion of Mr. Kashunas?
You know, I'm more in favor of woman, not the gender, so I'm proposed to stick to the original version.
Thank you. I shall now put the oral amendment to the vote. All those in favor of the oral amendment, please raise your voting cards. Please hold them up. Thank you. All those against the oral amendment, please raise your voting cards, and please hold them up to give us a chance to count. Thank you. Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. The oral amendment is adopted. So now we go to. Or what about 38?
We've done, oh, sorry, yes, sorry, 38 as amended and then 39.
Okay, we'll now consider paragraph 38 as amended. Anyone against paragraph 38 as amended, please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 38 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 38 is adopted. We'll now take up paragraph 39. Is there anyone against paragraph 39? Please raise your voting card. All those in favor of paragraph 39, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions? Paragraph 39 is agreed to. All right, where do we go now? Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Okay, I'll now call on Mr. Habib from France to propose Amendment 22 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 39. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ce n'est pas Monsieur Habib, c'est Madame Boyer qui défend les amendements de Monsieur Habib. Cet amendement vise à ajouter un nouveau paragraphe au paragraphe 39. Et il a deux objectifs. Accueillir avec espoir la signature des accords d'Abraham entre Israël et les 4 pays arabes qui représentent une avancée significative pour la paix au Proche-Orient. Encourager toutes les parties à intensifier leurs efforts pour élargir ces accords à de nouveaux pays signataires. Donc je vous propose la rédaction suivante. Accueillir avec espoir la signature des accords d'Abraham entre Israël et 4 pays arabes qui représentent une étape importante sur la voie de la paix au Moyen-Orient et encourage toutes les parties à redoubler d'efforts pour élargir ces accords à de nouveaux pays signataires. Je vous remercie.
Does anyone want to speak against? From Belgium, please.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Alors, tout d'abord, dire évidemment qu'on n'est jamais opposé à des accords de paix, bien évidemment. C'est important que les peuples et les gouvernements se parlent, mais des accords de paix ne peuvent pas se faire au détriment du respect du droit des peuples à disposer d'eux-mêmes. Or, les accords d'Abraham semblent inclure une reconnaissance de la mainmise du Maroc sur le Sahara occidental, et c'est que cette reconnaissance se fait en contradiction avec la résolution 690 du Conseil de sécurité. Ça se fait également sans la participation du peuple sahraoui qui attend depuis 1991 l'organisation d'un référendum d'autodétermination que le Maroc lui refuse. C'est pour ça que je propose de ne pas soutenir cet amendement.
Mr. Kachunas.
Support of amendment. Thank you.
Votes in favor? Oh, from France, please.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais simplement rappeler que le Maroc est partenaire de l'OSCE également. Donc moi je soutiens effectivement l'amendement que j'ai proposé et j'exhorte mes collègues à le voter. Je vous remercie.
So, votes in favor for this amendment? Who is against that amendment? Abstentions? So amendment 22 is adopted. Paragraph 40. There are no amendments. We'll now vote on paragraph 40. Anyone against? Votes in favor? Abstentions? Amendment 23 of paragraph 40, it's adopted. So now we move to amendment 23, right? I call Ms. Bocerashvili from Georgia to propose the amendment 23.
Mr. Chair, are we?
Yes.
Have we skipped? Pardon me. I've lost my place. Excuse me.
So all things are in order, right? We move forward. Thank you very much. So amendment 23, please sustain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we talk about Georgia and Russia-Georgia conflict, every time we mention it, I think it is important to highlight what a role Russia has in conflict, what we have on our territory. So I propose, as it was Russian tanks that rolled into Georgia in 2008 and occupied Georgian regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and this is Russian Federation that is trying to create new reality and recognizing so-called independence of two regions and creating a sort of new notion of territorial integrity of Georgia. So that's why I'm proposing to replace in this paragraph diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict in Georgian regions of Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region, South Ossetia, by words, active engagement in peaceful resolution of the Russian Federation and Georgia conflict, and after territorial integrity to add within its internationally recognized borders. I think this is important addition to this article. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? Don't see nobody. Mr. Kachunas?
Important amendments, I support it.
Okay, votes in favor. Against? Abstentions? So the amendment was adopted. Thank you. So we pass to paragraph 41. We will now vote on paragraph 41. Anyone against? Nobody. Those in favor? Abstentions? So paragraph 41 is agreed. Paragraph 42 and 43, there are no amendments. We will now vote on both of paragraphs. Votes in favor. Against. Abstentions. So the paragraphs were adopted. We move forward. Amendment 24 is my amendment. I introduced this amendment because we need to reaffirm that the OSCE remains a cornerstone of the European security system in this profoundly worrying circumstances. Mr. Kachunas, what do you think about this amendment?
Yeah, okay, I'm okay with it.
So, anyone to speak against about this amendment? Okay, votes in favor. Against. Abstentions? So the amendment was adopted. Now we will vote on paragraph 44. Anyone against? Votes in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 44 was adopted. Paragraph 45 has no amendments. We will now vote on paragraph 45. Votes in favor? Against? Abstentions? So paragraph 45, it's agreed. We have Amendment 25. I call Mr. Vicker from the United States of America to propose Amendment 25 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 45.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I would say that Amendment 25 is actually complementary to the amendment which you authored as Amendment 24, and it exhorts the fundamental importance of a European security architecture that protects all the peoples of Europe. As we know, Moscow has openly targeted and victimized free sovereign countries that are outside of NATO and the European Union. These include, of course, Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine, and others, and this would stress the importance of security for the entirety of Europe, and I urge the adoption.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? No, so who are in favor of this amendment? Against? Abstentions? So amendment was adopted. Okay, Amendment 26. I call Mrs. Parts from United States of America to propose this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We definitely can say that we have a major war in Europe, very brutal war, and now security architectures that failed. As you probably all know, in 1994 at the OSCE conference, Russia signed Budapest memorandums providing assurances for integrity of Ukraine and as part of Ukraine giving up their nuclear weapons. That was the very dangerous precedent now when the country now attack another country. So I think it's, we should not have this war, such insanity in this century. I think we need to have a serious conversation. I think these institutions was part of other serious conversation, but we have to restore viable European security architecture. It's important conversations to have, and we have to acknowledge how we're going to deal with countries, aggressors that participate in these agreements and violate. But it's important conversation, and I hope you can support this amendment to highlight the importance of this conversation. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against? So, Mr. from Belgium.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. J'étais partagé sur cet amendement parce que j'étais d'accord avec la deuxième partie qui se retrouve en fait exactement dans l'amendement que nous venons de voter, l'amendement 25. Ce qui me pose problème dans l'amendement actuel, c'est le mot intrinsèque, inherent. Je ne pense pas que la Fédération de Russie soit intrinsèquement incapable aujourd'hui d'être un garant de sécurité. Aujourd'hui, peut-être oui, mais la Fédération de Russie, si le gouvernement change, j'espère qu'il changera, il ne pourra à un moment devenir ce garant de sécurité. C'est le mot inherent qui me pose un vrai problème, donc je pense que ce n'est pas une bonne chose de l'adopter comme tel.
Mr. Kachunas.
I support the idea to restore security architecture. That's why I'm supporting the amendment.
So, votes in favor on this amendment? Against? Six. Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. So the amendment was adopted. Amendment 27. I call Mr. Barna from Romania to propose this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a matter of rephrase the idea, because this is too defensive the form, the paragraph it is in this moment. Accepting in a way in this document is not okay to accept that has diminished the capacity of our organizations to deliver on its promises. So my proposal is to rephrase this paragraph, saying that considering that OSCE has managed to keep on functioning in the current security crisis generated by the Russian military aggression against Ukraine, and to provide support to the participating states. Thank you.
So anyone to speak against? I already saw our colleague from Latvia, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will call actually to colleagues to not to support this amendment, just for one clear reason. It might be that the organization will be unfunctional, since Russia is vetoing one of the member states' chairmanship of the organization. So to say that everything is smooth and functioning would be a false message. We have actually existential challenge ahead of us for the organization and its existence. So therefore, I would actually recommend to keep the paragraph as it is. It has its downsides as well. We have to recognize that it's not everything ideal within the organization and with its functions. So therefore, that is paragraph also stimulates for us to do more in order to bring back the functions of the institution. So therefore, I call for colleagues to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kachunas.
I also would like to propose to stick to this original version. We just talked about restoration of security architecture. We talked about we managed not to deter Russia against the war, you know, and that's why we should not be too optimistic. And I should keep the text as I propose to keep the text as it is.
Okay, thank you. Votes in favor. Okay.
Four is Mr. Dunava. Four was Mr. Dunava.
Against? Abstentions? Okay, so the amendment was defeated. We move forward. Paragraph 46. We now vote on paragraph 46. Votes in favor. Against? Against? Abstentions? So paragraph 46 is agreed. Paragraph 47 to 57
Mr.
has
Chair.
no amendments.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I would like, je voudrais avoir un vote séparé pour l'amendement 56 et proposer un amendement oral, s'il vous plaît.
We'll have a separate vote on paragraph 56.
56.
Yes, yes. Does anyone else want a separate vote on any of other paragraphs? No. So we will take paragraph 47 to 55 together. Anyone against? Votes in favor. Abstentions. So the paragraph 47 to 55 was agreed. We'll now vote on paragraph 56.
Monsieur le Président.
Please.
Monsieur le Président, si je peux, je voudrais souligner que dans la formulation du paragraphe, à la toute fin, quand on parle des États participants de l'OSCE, à tous les participants de l'OSCE de la possibilité d'utiliser cet instrument important dont dispose l'OSCE, ça voudrait dire qu'on ne pourrait pas, les États qui ont déjà ratifié la Convention ne pourraient pas l'utiliser si tous les participants ne sont pas là. Donc, il y a une erreur dans la formulation. Donc, pour faire en sorte qu'on puisse tous voter en faveur de ce paragraphe, je proposerais de rayer tous les mots avant « invite la Belgique », après « invite la Belgique », Monsieur le Président, pour conserver uniquement « reconnaît l'intérêt, notamment en période d'instabilité géopolitique, de renforcer et d'utiliser pleinement la Cour de conciliation et d'arbitrage de l'OSCE ». Point. Ce serait on rayerait tout le reste de la proposition, ce qui permettrait de faire en sorte d'encourager les pays qui ne l'ont pas ratifié à y adhérer, sans nommément le faire et sans priver ceux qui auraient droit d'y participer de pouvoir le faire.
Mr. Kachunas, we'll suspend. You think it's okay? Okay.
Yeah, we can support it.
So we need to suspend for 10 minutes to discuss about this thing. Okay. Thank you.
Written form. Great. Is everything fine? Yeah, no, we can do it. Yeah.
So if I know that didn't pass 10 minutes, but I see we are still all inside. So if you all are agree, I propose to continue our Meeting yes. Okay, thank you very much. So, we have an oral amendment which was proposed. So, I ask our colleague...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are we going to see the language of the oral amendment?
Yes, now I wanted to ask our colleague from Canada to present us his oral amendment. Thank you very much for your intervention. Please.
Okay, thank you. So the new Amendment 56 will be read like this. Recognize the value, particularly at the time of geopolitical instability, of reinforcing and making full use of the OSCE Court of Conciliation and Arbitration. That's it. So we are removing everything after.
So in conclusion, on paragraph 56, all the words about arbitration are deleted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, after arbitration.
And do I understand, Mr. Vice Chairman, that the rapporteur supports this oral amendment and thinks it would simplify things?
Of course, yes,
and,
of course.
And I agree.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So, in accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I will ask whether there is any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there is any objections, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it falls. If there is no objection, we will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as other amendments. That is, we will hear from the proposer of the oral amendment one speaker against the oral amendment and the opinion of the rapporteur. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. So I understand that aren't objections. I ask again, is there any objection on the oral amendment being considered? No? So does anyone want to speak against the amendment? No? So now we proceed to vote. Votes in favor of the amendment? Against? 2 against, abstentions? There aren't, so the amendment was agreed. Okay, so paragraph 56 was agreed as amendment.
We now vote.
So we'll now vote the paragraph 56 as was amendment. Votes for. So who is in favor? Okay, against? Abstentions? So we agreed paragraph 56 as was amended. Thank you. Finally, we will now vote on paragraph 57. Anyone against? Votes in favor? Abstentions? So paragraph 57 is agreed. So that concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you.
Jennifer, can we go on?
Thank you, Mr. Donava. That concludes consideration of amendments. Thank you. We'll now consider a proposal from the drafting committee. I know we're tight on time, but I think we can get through this order of business before we conclude this session. The drafting committee have asked the committee to separate out paragraphs 44 to 57 into a separate resolution, which if adopted would become Chapter 4 of the Vancouver Declaration. This is because those paragraphs deal with the OSCE and its institutional sustainability rather than with political or security matters. Are there any objections to this? Seeing not, the proposal is adopted. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended together. Does anyone want a separate vote on the draft resolutions? So we'll take the two resolutions together. Will those in favor of adopting the draft resolutions as amended, please raise their voting cards. Thank you. Those against, please raise your voting cards. Are there any abstentions? The draft resolutions as amended are adopted. Thank you. That concludes our business for this morning. We will start our consideration of supplementary items this afternoon at 2:00 p.m. The committee stands adjourned. Thank you.